I am with Earth Ministry in Washington, Interfaith Power and Light. It's good to be with you all. We're a statewide organization that specifically works on faith and environment. Just a brief overview for the few of you who are new to Earth Ministry. We are a nonprofit organization. We've been around for 26 years. And like I said, really focused in on that intersection of faith and environment. And of kind of working on 3 levels of formation to be active stewards of God's creation. So the first level we work on is that personal faith formation piece of why do we care as people of faith about creation? And remember that question because we'll come back to it. So it's connecting our faith with the environment. Then it's, well, what do we do about it, right? So we look at our religious communities as a great organizing model to really lean into those shared values. And we have a Greening Congregations program that over 60 congregations statewide have completed that's really for leaning into the call to stewardship. But then even when you know, at your church, you change your light bulbs, you plant your garden, you go solar maybe, you've got environmental education classes and all of that, you kind of get to the, well, what's next? And that's where advocacy comes in. That's the third level we work on, when we really want to speak up for systemic change. We can say, our church is doing all that we can, right? But our elected officials have a responsibility to reflect that in the policies that surround us in the society we live in. So the kind of mic drop of God created the world, right? Called it good, and here we are entrusted to care for it. And a couple things. So if you're in the panel, you heard me say I'm in seminary, studying to do faith and environment, but with a deeper theological grounding. So I wrote a paper recently on Genesis 1 creation, on the words of dominion, right? And seeing that when you go back to look at that word choice in context, it's really meaning a selfless beneficiary to all, right? To really work for the well-being of everything. The other thing I'll point out is when God creates the earth and calls it very good, right? It's the only time in that creation, the days of creation, that it's the very is there. That's not just pointing to the humans as being the last piece of creation, but it's pointing to the overall. Now creation is complete, and so that interconnected web is very good. And our call within that is to maintain it. The other piece you mentioned is intergenerational justice, right? So what we're leaving for future generations and wanting to provide our kids, our grandkids with abundant resources so that they can thrive as well.
Hi, Tracy. My faith is the Buddhist faith and tradition. And our perspective is that what we need to look at is harm and suffering.
Deep call to address the suffering of others. And in the human community, right, so we see across the board that those who do the least to cause environmental harm are the ones that feel it the most, right? And then also in the animal world, right? The animal, like, we're seeing mass species extinction, and they're not doing. I've been playing with in the last year. If you take the away from Earth, right? If you take that away and you call it Earth, you call her Earth, and that's a name, right? And it takes kind of the possessiveness out of it, and remembering that that Earth is a living organism in itself. And you also mentioned our kids, right? Our kids they're the leaders in the climate movement right now, man. They've got it, and they're the ones haranguing the grown-ups to get to work, right? But also incorporating that more into our religious education for young ones, especially, is really powerful. So this has been really great. And with that, I want to say, so how do we respond, right? And that's what we're here to talk about today, is how do we put our faith into action. So I always encourage you to share your why, and to remember to say that you're doing this as a person of faith, right? So again, if you heard my question to the panel, I was saying I'm always trying to get people to say, I'm faith first, right? And that's why I care for creation. I'm not an environmentalist who also happens to be a person of faith, but I'm for me, a Lutheran, and it's so deep in my theology and my core values of my faith that I can do nothing else but do my best to be a good steward. And so when I talk to a decision maker and I tell them that I'm an active member of a church in his district, or her district, they see numbers behind me, right? Especially because people of faith tend to vote.
Right.
Elected officials really do listen to us as a constituency. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a policy expert. I actually really like that because I can, again, keep my core identity as a person of faith. That said, I work very closely in partnership with the organizations who are those scientists, policy experts, economists, impacted communities, right? So we work in broad coalitions within the secular environmental movement to be really strategic in where we are providing opportunities for the faith community to plug in. What the Clean Fuel Standard is looking at is increasing the efficiency of the transportation sector. It's the second largest polluter in Washington state. And right now there's kind of this gap in the fuels of the West Coast because California, Oregon, and British Columbia all have a clean fuel standard. So that means all of the dirty stuff is getting funneled into Washington.
Oh dear.
Because it can't go elsewhere. This is our 100% clean electricity bill. This is the big talk in Olympia this year. This last sentence on the bottom sums up what the policy will do, which is eventually a 20% reduction in the carbon intensity of fuels by 2035. And there's a benchmark along the way for 10% down by 2028. We've been working on it for 4 years, right? Of this coalition that includes tribal partners, communities of color, low-income communities, business, labor, health, faith. We've all worked together for so long, we're not stopping, and this is what we're working together on next. So you have the bullet points down here, and the one at the very bottom is the eventual goal, which is to get Washington on a 100% clean electric grid by 2045. And it has some realistic benchmarks along the way to get us there. So phasing out coal by 2025. There's some 2030 interim reduction targets, so that would prevent really build out of new fossil fuels. And then really increasing the investment in clean energy in a way that creates jobs. In the past, when I've been in Olympia for climate bills, you know, you kind of get the big oil and the like saying, oh, we're just opposed to this. Like, nope, we're not going to let it go anywhere. This year it was very different. It was much more of a conversation, right? Because the utilities know this is the direction we're moving, and so they don't want to be left behind. They were shared all the time today, but it's also on the back of your fact sheet down here, 1-800-562-6000. And you just use this template and fill in the blanks for you, right? You share what part of your identity is really central to this issue, where you're from, if you're a member of a religious community, or what district you're in, what values you have, and then your ask of what you want them to support. So it's really identity, values, ask are the 3 components of a good legislative action. So hopefully this will help you make the call for real. It only takes 7 calls to move an elected official. So even if your person might be a hard no, if they hear from 7 of you, then they'll say, maybe I should learn more about this 100% clean bill, right? If